Hi again, Risa here, back with another episode of Ask Risa. This is my fortnightly video series where I discuss some common wedding planning questions and problems that you might be having if you're trying to plan your own wedding. So I have been in the midst of doing a COVID wedding planning series because this pandemic is going to be with us for a while. And even though we can't currently hold weddings, we are hoping to be able to hold weddings sometime soon. But there are going to be a lot of limitations, and keeping your guests safe has to be your number one priority. So I've been doing this whole series about ways to have a wedding but maintain social distancing. So this is actually part 4 in the series. Last week I was talking about cocktail hour and how to handle that, and it went so long I had to move the dinner portion of this into a whole separate video. So this is the 4th video in the series. I started with talking about entertainment options that you can do instead of dancing. Then I talked about pre-ceremony, guest arrival, and the ceremony. Last week, like I said, I talked about cocktail hour, and today I'm going to talk about dinner and how to safely serve dinner to a lot of people at your wedding. So last week I covered getting all the guests into the space for the dinner part of the reception. So normally when you have a wedding, you have guests seated at either 60-inch rounds or 72-inch rounds. So that's either a 5-foot round table or a 6-foot round table. And a 60-inch round comfortably seats 8 people. You could squeeze 10 in. 72-inch round comfortably fits 10 people. You can squeeze 12 people. That's out. Don't do that. You do not want that many people sitting at a table unless they're all part of the same family. You are going to want to think on a much smaller scale. Think more like a restaurant where you're going to have a lot of 2 tops and 4 tops and maybe an occasionally larger table. You do not want to mix households that don't live together. Or people that aren't part of the same bubble. There's been a lot of talk. Some people call it different things, but it's like if you as a household and your neighbors as a household are very close and you decide to form a bubble, a quarantine bubble, you basically are only interacting with each other. You're not socializing with anyone else. So you form a bubble. Anyone with whom you are regularly interacting and coming into contact with, they're part of your bubble, but your bubble has to be small. It can't be like 4 or 5 groups of people. So you don't want to mix households and you don't want to mix bubbles. Doing a seating chart is going to be more complicated for you, because you'll have to find out from each individual couple or family who they have been interacting with. So like if you as the bride have 3 sisters, but they haven't been interacting with each other because they all live in different households and they haven't been seeing each other, then you don't want to seat them all at the same table. But if they have been interacting with each other regularly and they're part of a bubble, then you can seat them at a table. But you're going to have to reach out to them to find that out. It's not the sort of information you're going to have for all of your guests. You probably know for your immediate family, but not for your extended family and not for your friend group or anything like that. So you're going to have to do some investigating and ask some questions like, who have you been interacting with? Who are you comfortable sitting with? And that sort of thing. So you're going to have more tables that are smaller in size and smaller in groups. And you'll have to work it out with either your venue or your rental company as to what size tables they have available. A lot of venues do not have smaller tables, so that might be a problem for you, or it's possible that venues are going to start purchasing smaller tables because I've said repeatedly, I think this problem is going to be with us for a while. We're not getting out of this anytime soon. So that's tip number 1. Then when it comes to the actual service of food, having the meal pre-plated and placed before the guests by waitstaff is your safest option because waitstaff can be masked and gloved, whereas you're not going to ask your guests to wear masks and gloves, not to mention the fact that they're trying to eat and you can't eat with a mask on. So that's kind of a non-starter. Any sort of shared item, like normally we would have 1 salt and pepper shaker per table, maybe 2. That's no good. If you're going to have salt and pepper, you're going to need them for everybody. So having that many salt and pepper shakers is probably unrealistic. And, if you want to have it, you're probably going to need those little paper packets. Like that you get on airplanes. And nobody wants their wedding to feel like airplane food service, but you got to do what you got to do. Oftentimes there's a shared butter dish. Sometimes there's a shared water pitcher. Sometimes, often bread is in a basket that is passed around. None of that is happening anymore. Everything has to be individually served to people. There can be no shared surfaces, no shared touching of surfaces. Again, unless it's people who live in the same house with each other, because they're presumably touching all the same stuff anyway. So you have to think about who's sitting at that table. So a pre-plated meal placed in front of the guest by the waitstaff, that's the safest way to go. If you do need to, for whatever reason, have a buffet, that it's going to have to be modified. People cannot self-serve. It's going to have to be staffed by waitstaff, again, who are wearing masks and wearing gloves. All the food will have to be dispensed onto plates by the staff manning the buffet. And there will have to be a plexiglass shield covering the food and protecting the staff from the guests. So, but then again, they have to have a way to like reach under the shield to put the food on the plate. It's going to feel like a cafeteria. Like the way I'm describing it probably makes you think of a cafeteria, and that's what it's going to look like. So if you're okay with that, fine. But if you're concerned about that, then don't do a buffet. Have a pre-plated meal. It's just going to be easier and safer. So that's that. Then when it comes to desserts, the days of having like a big dessert buffet with all kinds of different things on it, including the wedding cake, those are gone, at least temporarily, for a little while. Can't have all that food sitting out, being exposed to the air and the germs and the droplets being circulated by all the people talking and everything like that. If you're doing a wedding cake, I don't recommend putting it out ahead of time. I recommend waiting until the last minute. We usually refrigerate those anyway, especially in the summer months, but they're usually delivered many hours before the reception starts. So the cake is going to be put somewhere in the kitchen, in a refrigerator, somewhere. So someone, your planner, your caterer, someone will have to get it out just before the ceremonial cake cutting takes place. And obviously you want photos of the cake, so we would bring it out with enough time to give the photographer a chance to take some photos of the cake before the cake cutting, but no guests should be allowed to take photos of the cake. And as a frequent wedding guest who loves to take pictures of cake, it pains me, like it physically pains me to say that, because that's one of my favorite things to do when I go to my friend's wedding is take pictures of the cake. But you just can't have that many people in that kind of proximity to a wedding cake that's going to be cut up and served to people. It's not a good idea. So bring the cake out at the last minute, let the photographer, the official photographer, take photos, do the ceremonial cake cutting, and then the catering staff can take it back to the kitchen, slice it up, and plate it if it's being served as the dessert, which it isn't always. A lot of couples are just doing like a small cutting cake and not serving it as dessert. But if it is being served as dessert, it will have to be plated and then again brought to the guests and given to each individual guest. Oftentimes we will repurpose one of the buffet tables and turn it into a cake table. We'll just put out a bunch of slices on the table, and that way anybody who wants one can come grab one. Nope, can't do that anymore. So the cake's gonna have to be individually handed to people at their tables. If they don't want it, they can refuse it, but there's no self-serve cake anymore. And then similarly, if you're serving something else for dessert, cupcakes or cookies or eclairs or, whatever, it should be plated and brought to the guest tables. You can't really do a dessert buffet unless you're going to put in place all the same precautions that I talked about for the dinner buffet, where the staff are actually serving the desserts to people. There's plexiglass, there's no self-service. You just can't do self-service anything and be safe about it. Everything has to be handed directly to someone by a gloved and masked catering staff member. And then the other thing that goes with dessert is coffee and tea service. We almost always have just a station set up, a table with coffee dispensers. We usually have regular coffee, decaf coffee, and then hot water because we have a tea bag selection, and we usually use disposable cups, and we've got the coffee stirrers and the creamer and the sugar and all the stuff that goes with having coffee. Sometimes we use China cups, sometimes we use disposable. But anyway, usually that's all self-service, but it can't be. 2 videos ago, I was talking about guest arrival and welcome beverages and how you should still have welcome beverages, but there should be an attendant for them. All the nozzles on the dispenser should face the attendant, not the guest. The attendant should dispense the drinks and hand them to the guests. Gonna have to do the same thing for coffee and tea. It's gonna have to be a station with a person standing there who can hand the guest their cup of coffee and hand them a creamer and a sugar packet if they want it. And then if they want tea, they can get a cup of hot water and request whatever tea bag they want, and the attendant can hand them both of them. So I know none of this sounds like a typical wedding, and it's not. Nothing about this is typical. But if you want to still have a wedding reception and we still have high numbers of the virus, you're going to have to take precautions, because nobody wants to be responsible for holding an event where a lot of people get sick and potentially die. I know I wouldn't want that, and I'm sure you wouldn't want that. So these suggestions, some of them might seem like overkill. They might seem like, God, there's no way I want to do that. But I really, truly believe that these are the best ways to keep your wedding safe and to keep your guests safe and to make it a good experience for everyone. So I think I've covered pretty much everything now. If you have only watched the last couple, you'll want to go back to the beginning of this series and watch the one where I talked about how to entertain your guests instead of having a packed dance floor. I don't know why I started with that one. I should have started chronologically, but I didn't. So go back and watch that one because I had a lot of ideas for what you can do instead of having dancing. And if you have any other wedding pandemic related questions that I have not addressed in this 4-part series, let me know. And I'm happy to give you my 2 cents or brainstorm some ideas with you. This is our new normal for at least a little while, for the foreseeable future. And we're just gonna have to find a way to deal with it. So I hope this is useful and informative, and I hope that we get a vaccine soon and that we can all stop being afraid to go socialize with people again. But in the meantime, we're doing the best we can. All right, bye for now.